Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
So I've been visiting family in southeast South Dakota recently over the past couple years, and some creepy shit goes down over here. First story isn't that scary, but sets the tone for how rural Dakota people can act on occasion. Driving down the interstate toward Yankton. Near a small town called Mission Hill, there's this church camp area that's a church and a bunch of large buildings that look like camp cottages. Everyone around the area says these people are known to do some weird shit. Uncle says it's not some retreat or camp, they live there all year and provide for themselves. They operate very similarly to Hutterites, which are people who operate like the Amish but use some technology. But the local Hutterites don't associate with these people. He says he's seen only a few older members leave and buy shit at stores in town, but driving by he's seen over 20 people at times. Be me driving to Yankton, cutting through the area. Drive past the area where the church area is. Usually you just see the area a half mile away from the road and occasionally people, but this time they're standing not far off the road in wooded areas just staring at cars. A Kia was driving in front of me and I could see the driver was also having his head turned looking at the people. Hear a large bang and see that the Kia hit something and swerved to narrowly miss him driving in part of the ditch. I drive a Jeep. Fucking tree in the middle of the road just past the weird church area. Pull over to see if I can help. The Kia's fucked tire popped and shit. Ask the woman driving if she needs help, she says she's fine and makes a few calls. Get in my car to leave. Spy the camp people walking towards the car from the hill in my rear view. Get that bad feeling in my gut. Drive away. Thinking back, this was all really creepy and all seemed like a setup. We hadn't had any storms or hard wind in a week or two to knock the tree down. I got more stories of the area to dump.
Setting: Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Me and my friends explore spooky places in South Dakota all the time, including so far the Yankton Insane Asylum, a lot of small abandoned buildings, and the scariest of them all so far, Spook Road. Spook Road is a local urban legend. I remember the actual name of the road very clearly, despite me having horrible directional skills. 264th Street. It was the scene of a triple murder and a self-end. There are graveyards, mostly family ones, sporadically on the side of the road. It's very foresty and has huge trees all along it. It was rumored to be littered with abandoned buildings. My mom and her sister went there when they were younger, and they claim her hood started opening and closing and that their headlights were constantly flickering. I, being the skeptic that I am, didn't believe them at all. That was a terrible mistake. Me and my friends set out. We got a crowbar, flashlights, our camera, and loads of other tools we might have needed. We got into my car, I pulled up Google Maps, and we left at around 11:30 p.m. It was a 30-minute drive to get there from where we all lived. And we were bringing a new guy with us, named Gage. Gage is pretty immature, but also a hilarious guy to bring on the trip. He has a growth disability which makes him look really young, which the other guys made fun of him for plenty. The other guys weren't expecting much, as was I, but Gage kept on joking that it would be completely over the top, like a ghost would pop out of nowhere, kidnap and assault us. Little did we know, something over the top was actually going to occur. So we arrived. When we first arrived, nothing significant happened. There were 5 bridges we were supposed to cross. The first was the scene of the self-end. There were no abandoned buildings we could see. New, modern homes were being built there, and it almost felt like a normal road. Around the 3rd bridge, our cameraman, Isaac, said he wanted to get out to get a shot of the moon. I complied, and let him try and get a shot. Isaac hops out of the car to get the shot. Then, Isaac's childhood best friend, Aiden, whispered to me the bright idea of speeding off and leaving poor Isaac in the dark, alone, with no flashlight. I floored it. Isaac ran after us, but it was no use. We pulled at least 100 meters ahead and I turned off the headlights. Spook Road has a very eerie feeling when it's pitch black dark out. I'm not afraid of the dark, and I never have been, but being out there, even enclosed safely in a car with Gage and Aiden, I was petrified. I couldn't imagine the fear Isaac was having. Isaac hadn't come back. It had been at least 5 minutes, and he should have caught up by then. Aiden started to worry. I started backing up and turned the lights on, and suddenly, out of nowhere, bam! 2 palms landed on my driver's side window, and my door swung wide open. It was Isaac. With a wide, laughing grin, he exclaimed, "Gotcha. I guess that was fair." I left him stranded in the woods, so he royally scared the absolute fuck out of me. We drove further down Spook Road, this time past all the bridges. I saw a trail leading off the road, so I drove on it to try and find a non-noticeable place to park. It led to an empty gravel lot surrounded by fields. So much for being non-noticeable. I parked my car in the middle, where I'm sure anyone could see it from the road if they shined a light on it. We grabbed our tools and we started walking towards the road. We were walking, joking, and then it happened. In the sky, I saw a light approaching us. I alert my friends and say, "Hey, guys, I think there's a helicopter coming towards us." They all look and say it's probably not coming towards us. But it was getting closer. I saw it had a spotlight on it, and then we all started to panic. It was getting closer and the spotlight was getting brighter. As the blinding light came closer and brighter, I looked down at the ground, only to see it was illuminated. The spotlight was literally, unmistakably right on us. Holy shit. It didn't stay there for long, thank God. It then brushed over us, and then kept flying in the same direction. We were fucking spooked. Everyone was panicking, but we didn't come all this way for nothing. We kept heading to the road. On the side of the road, there was an abandoned hunting shack, or something like that. It was completely enshrouded in trees, easy to miss. We headed towards it and explored it a little. Not much there, we can't get in. There were broken windows and such, but there were metal bars behind the broken glass. And a heavy-duty door on the front. No hope in even trying to get in. So we start walking down the road further. Out of nowhere, we heard a weird fucking noise. Like nothing I've ever heard before. It was in the video, but it sounded completely different in person. It sounded like a low humming noise. Suddenly, in the distance, we see headlights. They were fucking bright. We weren't in them yet, but they were bright. They were getting continuously closer. So we ran down the road back towards the little shack. We barely made it to the shack in time, and as we were running towards it, Aiden close-lined himself on a chain running along the entrance of where the shack was. Aiden was mumbling in pain, and the truck drove by. Very, very slowly. And it had 2 huge spotlights on it. Not their headlights, actual spotlights. We all held our breath. What would happen if we get caught out here, after the town's curfew, with various tools for breaking into places? The spotlights were pointed directly into the woods, and they just barely skimmed over our heads. Thank fucking God. The truck drove by us. We waited for a good minute. We checked on Aiden and helped him up, but he still seemed to be in pretty bad shape, and he had a few big cuts on his legs. We usually bring a medic guy named David with us on our adventures, but we didn't this time. We started running again. This time, at my advice, towards the truck, which was now at least a few hundred meters down the road. The only way to get back to my car was to run towards it, and get onto the off-road just a few dozen meters behind the truck. The truck had stopped further down the road towards where we were running. It looked like a few people got out and were looking around for someone. We ran and ran. We ran back to the car. We had no medical shit, so Aiden splashed some vodka onto his wounds. No fucking idea if that's a good idea or not. I started driving the car without the headlights on. I couldn't see shit. I had to drive based purely on what I remembered the road as. We barely snuck by the truck. Thankfully, my car is really fucking quiet and the people seemed to be pretty far away from their truck by that point. When we were driving away from various different roads connected to the Spook Road, there were cars driving back and forth. Not usual traffic for what the time was. I believe around 1 a.m. We passed one, and it was a pure black Escalade with completely tinted windows. It didn't stop us or anything. I have tinted windows too, so for all they know, we're just a local farmer going to tend to his cows or some gay shit like that. Aiden gave a summary of what happened to the camera, and we all headed home. In conclusion, think what you will about this story. Perhaps it's just the police force trying to crack down on stupid punks trying to investigate a bogus local urban legend. I'm sure we're not the first to try. But what explains the odd, low, humming noise? Why and how would a tiny town? Brandon is the city Spook Road is in. It's miniature. Fund a helicopter and several patrol vehicles to monitor it. I don't know what to think, to be honest. I have no fucking idea. Please, give me some theories.
He posted video links, but they are now dead.
About 20 years ago in South Dakota, I got an apartment in a 100-plus-year-old house that had been turned into 3 apartments. In the apartment, there was a standard bedroom and a very odd room just off from the entryway that had no door and was very small. Overall, that room had a weird vibe. The night I was moving my stuff in, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck and felt like something was watching me. I walked out into the living room, and there was a man in a straitjacket with the most piercing eyes I had ever seen, grinning at me like a psychotic person would. I instantly ran the fuck out of there. I went and picked up a friend and told him nothing about what had happened. I asked him if he wanted to see my new place. We get to the apartment and I'm in my bedroom moving stuff in. I hear my friend absolutely screaming in terror. I ran out and knew exactly what he saw, and I asked him if he saw it too. He did. We ran to his car, decided to pick his brother up but not tell him anything about what we saw. The first thing the brother does when he gets there is walk into that weird room, go into the corner and pretend he's in a straitjacket. My friend and I freak out and ask him why he did that. He just shrugs and says it feels like a room where someone would be in a straitjacket. Long story short, I broke my lease and never went back there. None of us did drugs or had a history of mental illness. Last year, out of curiosity to make sure I wasn't making this story up for the past 2 decades, I reached out to my buddy who saw the straitjacket man. He said he still remembered it, but we must have been tired. Apparently, being tired means we both see a man in a straitjacket at different times that can appear and disappear. It sounds like a made-up story, and believe me, I wish it was, because I still can't explain it.
Ghost, perhaps. I would have gone back in to see if I could see it again. Just peek around the corner at least. But since it's a house and not like an asylum or prison, I'm interested in why a ghost in a house would be in a straitjacket. Was it ethereal? Reminds me of my childhood home. We had this little radiator room off our kitchen where the hot water heater was, and my older brother told me that way back before our family was there, a family had a kid who had severe mental issues, so his parents had him tied to a chair in that water heater room and he died in there and his ghost haunted that room. I'm sure it was bullshit, but it was still terrifying for me at 4 years old. Kecked at you sending your friend in there to see without warning him though, lol.
It looked just like a real person. I tried looking up the history of the building but didn't get far. It definitely was in the oldest part of town and right near the hospital. That whole town, in my opinion, has really weird shit going on. A friend of mine would dream about demons in a pit in their basement there, which doesn't sound too weird, right? People have bad dreams all the time. Only thing is, once the house was sold, the new owners got in contact with them and said they had been having weird things happen and strange dreams about the basement. That town itself is known for having weird people. If you go somewhere else in the state and mention you lived there, that's the first thing they always say. I've lived in 6 other states. I've traveled the US numerous times, and I'd have to agree. The people there are very off.
Are you willing to share the name of the town? If there's nothing worth looking up and reading about, then never mind.
Aberdeen, South Dakota. There's probably not much worth looking up. If you ever travel through, be prepared to meet some absolutely goofy people.
Last year, was working a really shit job at a cowboy museum in South Dakota. One day we're completely snowed in, 10 degrees outside max, told to shovel away snow just in case we get visitors. Bro, what? Get a shovel and put on a heavy-ass coat, shovel away snow for like 5 minutes, and I puss out, try to open the door. Won't budge. Probably just freaking out, but I feel like I'm gonna get frostbite if I stay out here any longer. As I walk around the side of the building to the back door, I freeze in my tracks. Out in the parking lot, I see movement. I stare for a couple of seconds, but then I see him. There's a fucking gnome, similar to the picture but wearing all white without the dunce cap. We stared at each other for a bit. All of a sudden, I'm grabbed from behind. It's my fucking manager. She's treating me like an autist, telling me I could have frozen outside. You told me to come out here. As she walks me back, I turn around to see where the gnome is. He's gone. So is my fucking shovel. Never asked anyone there about it. Pretty sure it was a schizo moment.
1996, hunting out of state in South Dakota with my cousins. We get a good tip on a spot and drive out to check this place out. We park the truck about noon, check our watches, and decide to split up and meet back at 5 p.m. I get my bearings and hike in for about 20 minutes, marking my way in. Find a nice clearing and decide to set up. As I sit patiently, quietly, the forest comes alive with the sounds of nature. Small animals scurrying about, birds moving from tree to tree. Then something seemed very off. The forest, which was bathed in sunlight, now looked sepia-toned, like an old photograph. The sounds of the forest were gone. It was dead silent. There was no movement anywhere. I never felt more unease in my life. I felt like I shouldn't be there and needed to leave. I could feel my heart pounding in my head. I looked down at my watch and saw only 2 hours had gone by. Fuck this, I'm going back. I start making my way back and notice the forest came back to life. The sky getting darker. Really darker. I emerge from the edge and see all my cousins in the truck. Where were you, man? We were honking the horn, firing off a couple shots. I didn't hear anything, and I wasn't gone that long. It was 5:40 p.m. My watch said 3:10 p.m. I thought maybe my watch went bad. I reset it. It never lost time for as long as I had it since. 1 minute it was like looking around, feeling the wind, hearing branches sway, everything like it should be. Then somebody threw a switch and everything stopped. No wind, no more noises, just golden sepia-colored surroundings. Like you feel trapped somewhere you shouldn't be, and the feeling of you need to leave. No.
My grandfather told me the story about how he was driving west to east along an empty stretch of road in southern South Dakota. He stopped at a stop sign at an intersection with nothing in sight. No buildings and no other vehicles. Then there was a bright light that hit him. He looked up and saw a bunch of blinking lights. Next thing he knew, he was at the counter of a diner about an hour down the road. It was about 6 hours later, and he had no idea what had happened. He asked the person at the diner when he came in, and the guy told him he came in about 10 minutes ago and just started drinking coffee without talking much. My grandpa told him what had happened, and the guy said something like, "Yep, that happens around here sometimes." Nothing weird ever happened to him again. He avoided that area for the rest of his life. He said he doesn't believe in aliens and doesn't know what happened, but I had a suspicion he thought he had been abducted and just never accepted it. He told me never to tell this story to other people. But he died years ago, and most of the people who knew him are dead, so I figured it was okay.
So here was an interesting experience, not really paranormal per se, but definitely related. So there was a time when I was running around with some gangster types. Of course, at the time I didn't really know that. So here I was driving a guy around to pick up some dope. I locked my keys in my running car. Oh fuck, oh right. Well, it was about that time that a homeless-looking man came around the corner and just walked up to me and said, "Need some help getting back into your car?" Of course I'm like, yeah. He said, "Get a coat hanger." Bent that shit up and we got back in my car lickety-split. Got back on the road. Everything was cool. He only asked for a Mountain Dew in return. Later I found out if things didn't go down that way it would have been trouble. And this is rural South Dakota, about a mile out of a podunk little town. What kind of homeless man just sits around a bunch of dumpsters at a gas station and helps people out, then refuses money when you offer it to him?
A few years ago, my family and I went on vacation across South Dakota to see the Badlands. During our road trip through the state, most of what we saw was completely flat. Open, pretty much always empty landscape for hundreds of miles all around. At several points I just started feeling uneasy about this for some reason. Unnerved at the fact that there's next to nothing around me, and looking as far as the horizon goes still shows nothing at all. I remarked this to my dad later on in the trip, and he said he felt the same way. We're from Minnesota, so we're not exactly strangers to flat open space. But South Dakota cranked it to 11. Ghost dance. The ghost dance was the central rite of a Messianic Native American religious movement in the late 19th century. It indirectly led to the massacre of some 250 Sioux Indians at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, in 1890, marking an end to the Indian Wars. As a trance-inducing rite of a hybrid faith, it combined elements of Christianity with Native American religious traditions. The ghost dance first emerged around 1870 in the Walker Lake area on the California-Nevada border. A Paiute mystic named Wodziwab, or Fish Lake Joe, began to preach an apocalyptic vision in which a great flood or fire would eliminate the white man from the world and deceased tribal people would return alive to the earth. Wodziwab's assistant, a shaman named Tavibo, spread the new doctrine among Nevada tribes. The original ghost dance fervor among far western American tribes gradually ebbed, only to be rekindled in 1888 by Wovoka, Tavibo's son. The new prophet, also known as Jack Wilson, was said to practice miracles such as curing the sick, controlling the weather, and withstanding bullets shot at him. Wovoka claimed that while feverishly ill, he saw in a vision all deceased Indians surrounding the throne of the Great Spirit God, who told him to teach his people to love one another and to live peacefully with white people. Further, all deceased Indians would return to the earth and recover their ancestral lands. According to the vision, white men and women would retreat to their European homelands. The prophet taught his followers a 5-day ritual of song and circle dances that would hasten the coming of this new millennium. Hence, the ghost dance was born.
Be me staying at old grandpa's rural farm near Bearsford, South Dakota. Grows corn and has a big all piece of land. Great for pheasant hunting, so we come visit. Small trailer style house for me and my younger brother. Grams leaves me and my brother alone while he goes to the nearest bar at night. He's a drunk, so we know he's going to come back late. Fuck around in the house and watch TV for a few hours. Start hearing cracking like someone driving their car through the cornfield. The family lab is going ridiculous howling. Sit at the window in fear because no car lights, and it really sounds like something big is smashing through the 6 feet corn. Brother's trying to get a hold of Grams through the local bar since he doesn't have a cell. I'm looking out the window and the sound has stopped. In the moonlight, I clearly see 2 all-white figures crawl out of the cornfield. These things looked like fucking Gollum. All white, no clothes, with really long arms on all 4s. At this point, I got my brother to get me my hunting 12 gauge, way too spooked. They're like sniffing the air or something. I open our front door slowly and instantly they fucking turn and stare with these huge black eyes I'll never forget. Let off a 3.5-inch shell at them and one lets out this inhuman screech. I fired from our doorway to the field at like 30 yards or so. Both run back into the corn crazy fast, making like hyena sounds. About 2 hours later, drunk Gramps shows up drunk as shit. Slurring and damn near incoherent. Ask him about what I just saw and he instantly sobers up. Insists we must be imagining shit and cuts our hunting trip short, sending us back. What did I fucking shoot?
Hey X, Trip from TV here. Love your board and want to share a story with you. I used to live in South Dakota. Literally middle of nowhere. It was like 8 miles to the nearest town. Milk was almost $5 a gallon, and I remember getting suspended from school for saying "oh my god" during recess. You know, that kind of town. This was in 1999, mind you. Anyways, I was in 5th or 6th grade when I lived there and spent a year or so in total isolation outside of anyone but my family. We had shitty dial-up internet, so I spent my recreation time exploring the outlying swamps and fields. Most of our land was a swamp, so I spent my summer picking leeches off my skin and seeing what was over the next hill and just looking around all the old buildings. I was really big into Pokemon and Star Fox 64 at the time, so I'd run around the property pretending to be Fox McCloud or Ash. You have to realize I had literally miles of forgotten land to explore, full of broken down farming equipment and ponds. One even was deep enough to be a lake but not wide enough, if that makes sense. But I digress. This story is about what looked to be chicken coop reinforced like a house in the ghetto. One of the first things my parents noted about this farm was the smell. We blamed it on the swamp because it did stink, but this was different. The swamp had an earthy sour smell. This was metallic or coppery, almost like that taste after a nosebleed. After getting settled in, we started snooping. My dad took over the garage as his own and found a dead cat. My brother and I found a dead skunk and some kind of farming equipment, but it was within this first week and a half or so we checked more into this locked-up building that, now that I look back, had no reason to exist. It was just randomly there, like this outdoor storage area. It was locked up like a house in the ghetto. There was chicken wire in the glass windows and metal bars in front of that. The wooden door had a padlock, and oddly that was it. My dad has messed with it before, of course, but made no real effort to get in there. It was after a few days, when we narrowed down when that coppery smell was coming from, that we made the effort to break in. At first I assumed maybe it was a small makeshift slaughter room, but after prying the lock off the door, all we found was a pit. The smell was overwhelming. Decay and blood. It made me sick, and we hadn't even walked into the room yet. I had no idea what this farm was used for before we moved in. I knew there was a fairly large chicken coop, this odd room, a garage, and the house. Was it supposed to be an outhouse, or a place to dump something gross? Something was wrong there, but that's when the weird stuff started to happen. We closed the door but didn't lock it. Soon after, my sister woke us all up freaking out one night. She had to have been about 9 at the time. We had one of those houses where you can open your window and sit outside on the roof. I'm not sure how to describe it. This freaked me and my brother out, saying something woke her up trying to open her window. The disturbing part is you could see the grease on the window. You could see where someone had touched it. My parents freaked the fuck out, and things only got worse. We had 2 dogs. They went apeshit one night, so my dad called them in. Only one came in. My brother's dog just vanished. My brother found the screen of his window scratched up one morning. I would go out exploring, and I swear to you guys, in those fields of cattails didn't move quite right at times. There was something there. I could go on all night, but I feel like this is TLDR already. Anyways, after a few more months of torment, we moved back to Montana. It was after my sister mostly, my dad got fucked with one night. Nobody was ever hurt. I think it was building up to hurting one of us though. Anyways, here's why I even made a topic. That hole, that smelled like a slaughterhouse. What was it and what came out of it? I can elaborate any details if you guys want, even Google map it and show you the shack. It's fucked up.
According to your details, you are fucked. Copper smell comes with a fucking skinwalker, goat man. You're lucky you didn't hear screams from the woods, supposedly from family members.
Someone said something about the goat man, and I admit I don't know much about it, but if something wanted to get in, it could have pretty easily have done so. This was during the summer, so we would all sleep with the windows open. My dad had set up shop in the garage, and some nights our dogs just would not shut up. They would just bark and growl at nothing, in no general direction, then suddenly just stop or start trying to get off their chains and get in the garage with my dad. He would hear something crawling on the roof and fogging up the glass or tapping on it, slamming on the sides. One night he was done and getting ready to head back to the house, but he couldn't get the door open. There was something against it from the outside. It was weird seeing my dad come back looking scared. I've seen him furious, sad, euphoric, drunk, but never scared. After that he started carrying his gun with him when he went out at night. Never during the day. He was worried he'd get jumpy and shoot one of us playing in the swamp or something. Eventually we called the police after my mom was attacked. At this point it was mostly, something this weird is going on, but I'm a rational person and don't believe monsters for real. I could have been neighbor kids but walking miles just to prank the new people in town. Then again, life was pretty dull there before all this started happening. So anyways, my brother and I got home from school one day and saw our dad was home. This was odd because he was supposed to be at work. Our mom was visibly shaken and my dad stressed out because someone had tried to break into the house. It started as just thumping, knocking on windows, throwing rocks at the front door. When she went outside and said she was calling the police, it got violent. He was trying to bash his way in, she said, but the door wasn't even locked. None of our doors were ever locked during the day. So the police or the sheriff or whatever had showed up and waited for my dad, and she showed the hole and they looked around the property. He didn't do shit. My dad said he didn't even seem like he cared. That very night I was in bed reading like I always do before passing out, dead silent. Everyone's in bed I think, and something slammed into my window. How that fuck didn't shatter right then and there I have no idea, but it jarred me to the point I just ran blindly out of my room and into my parents'. My dad went outside and made a big show, fired his gun so they knew he meant business, and then there was just silence, then real gunshots. Real as in, he saw something and was now trying to kill it. This was when things started to really disturb me and set in. See, my bedroom window was up on the second floor. It's like a 30-foot drop. There was a tree, but the branches were too thin to support anything but a bird or maybe a cat. Believe me, I've tried to crawl out of my window into the tree within the first week of moving in, because that would have been badass. Anyway, so there was no fucking way anything could have climbed up there. Could it have been a bird or a bat that hit my window? Could be, but birds are normally nested that time of the night and bats are pretty small. The week before this I probably would have just jumped and maybe almost had a heart attack, but shrug it off because we're all on edge. So my dad gets back in and said he chased it into the swamp and then it started making animal noises. Like just at the edge of the cattails, and those fuckers get tall and thick. So I did what any American would do in that situation and shot blindly into the brush. He said he could hear the noises move around, but never heard the rustling of the bushes. Was there more than one? Can it move that quietly? No idea. The animal noises were mostly like pig grunts, he described it, but more of a croak. If that makes sense. Well, none of this makes sense. When I tell other people about this story I get all kinds of looks. Or just and I can tell they think I'm full of shit. So I just kinda keep it to myself. Wouldn't you after seeing the same look every time? Anyway, that night the copper smell just would not go away. Normally we just kept away from that area, and unless the wind picked it up we didn't notice it too much, but that night it was just in there with us. After that things went down a notch, the banging stopped. Our dog seemed to relax again, but the smell was getting worse and its presence was more subtle. It was around fall and my parents had decided to stay. My dad argued with him shooting at who or whatever scared it off, but it was shit my brother and I started to notice around the property because, as said before, we would explore it all the time, and with things settling down around the house we started going out again. First it was the water. It used to be pretty clear in some areas, but now it was all reddish brown and shitty looking. Then there was the lack of wildlife. Sure, it was turning fall, but there were no frogs or little fish or even ducks. It could have been the changing season, who knows. Then it was the weird little carvings we'd find on some of the trees. Simple stuff like a circle with a square in the middle and a slash through it. I don't recall the others so well.
I work as a ranger in the Black Hills. We sometimes see a large black dog walking around the old ghost towns. Most of them are not really towns, just some foundations that are left. The dog is completely silent, and when you look at it, it just stares back. But if you turn your back on it, it slowly paws its way closer to you. You can see it getting closer out of the corner of your eye, but as soon as you look right back at it, it freezes again. It's huge, easily over 100 pounds, and matted. Looks old, like its flesh is not quite tight and strong anymore. You know, like an old dog does. But its muzzle is still jet black. Most of the time we just saw it at night, and your headlamp or truck lights would catch a flash of its eyes. I don't know anyone who has let it get too close, but it always scares the shit out of me. Normally seeing it out of the corner of your eye will alert you, and you can get in the truck and drive away or otherwise find an excuse to GTFO. As you drive away, it tends to stand in the center of the two-track or road and watch you drive, almost like it is noting your truck or something. A couple people have shot at it, but missed.
This is going to be a mixed bag. I've lived in South Dakota my entire life and have been surrounded by Lakota culture too. I remember very faintly in preschool that we would learn to count to 10 in Lakota, and sometimes we'd be told stories of Lakota spirits or entities. This will also contain stories I've heard from friends and family. I remember one time when I was maybe 13. I was on my grandpa's land with two of my cousins and we were driving the four-wheeler around. There's a few trees and some farm equipment on one area of the land, and as we approached it, all three of us saw movement. We stopped and shined a flashlight out, and I swear for a moment that we saw a tall woman with a white face and dark hair standing in the trees. She had a white dress of some sort too. Very cliché but still spooky. We panicked and sped back to my grandpa's house, and nothing else happened that night that I remember. When one of the Annabelle movies was released, I went to watch it with some of my cousins. We were all in middle school, so we got fairly freaked out by it. On the way home, I was in and out of sleep the entire way. We took a small dirt road and all three of us sat in the backseat while their mom drove. My older cousin and my aunt started telling stories about strange things they'd seen when driving on those dark dirt roads. They had both seen floating lights on several occasions. We didn't see any that night, though. My cousin also talked about how she's seen strange things on their property and heard weird noises. My aunt agreed and said she'd also seen strange things. When we got home, nothing really happened, but I didn't sleep at all. Another time, when I was around maybe 9 or 10, I had fallen asleep on my aunt's couch and I woke up to hear her and my mom talking about ghost stories. I remember very distinctly that my aunt mentioned a story that still freaks me out a bit. She had just been doing laundry and was heading downstairs to fold some clothes and see what else needed to be taken care of. She paused near the top steps because she saw a tall humanoid creature with impossibly long arms folding her clothes. The lower floor was dark but had just enough light to be able to see. I think she went back upstairs and waited rather than go downstairs. That creature never noticed her, and I don't think she ever saw it again. When my mom and my aunt were in high school, they had a couple friends who were very into the occult. My mom, aunt, and some friends were all in the car, and one of the friends who was into the occult stuff got possessed. I don't remember all the details, but he tried to slit his own throat and was speaking in a voice that wasn't his. I don't remember how he snapped out of it, but to this day he has that scar and is now extremely religious. Another story, this one from my friend. Her uncle messed around with a Ouija board in college, and some kind of evil spirit or demon got attached to him. He'd wake up with horrible deep scratches on his back, and weird stuff would happen in the house, and he became super religious because of it. He still prays and wears a cross necklace. One year for Christmas, my mom and my other aunt asked for a Ouija board. This was late 80s to mid-90s. Their grandma had no idea what it was for and bought one. Then when their mom saw it, she immediately took it outside and burned it while praying. I was told it made hissing noises and even screamed. In my last story, I've always felt watched in my current house, and I've heard weird tapping at night. We have pets, but there's no way they could have made this tapping. It was rapid and moved around the outer edge of the house, completely ignoring the fact that the patio makes it impossible to do that without stopping to open the doors. While I'm in the basement, I'll sometimes hear footsteps upstairs even when I'm the only one home and none of our pets are heavy enough to make that much noise. I've also heard distinctly human footsteps in the gravel road by my house when it's nearly midnight, and most of the people who live in this town are elderly and probably wouldn't take any midnight walks. Sorry for the short stories. My memory isn't very good, but I remember the vibes that each story gave me that freaked me out so bad when I first heard them.
Chiye-Tanka or Chiye-Tanka, meaning Big Elder Brother, is a woodland being in the Lakota and Dakota languages of the Great Sioux Nations. Some people associate the legend with Bigfoot. The Chiye-Tanka is a large, shaggy woodland being. According to various sources, Chiye-Tanka is a nature spirit and sacred messenger. According to Peter Matheson,
my travels with Indians began some years ago with the discovery that most traditional communities in North America know of a messenger who appears in evil times as a warning from the Creator that man's disrespect for his sacred instructions has upset the harmony and balance of existence. Some say that the messenger comes in sign of a great destroying fire that will purify the world of the disruption and pollution of earth, air, water, and all living things. He has strong spirit powers and sometimes takes the form of a huge hairy man. In recent years, this primordial being has appeared near Indian communities from the northern plains states to far northern Alberta and throughout the Pacific Northwest.
Most places drum up the ghost shit for business, whether or not they're haunted. I've stayed at a few because they're often awesome for pure history. Winchester Mystery House is both mundane and creepy as fuck. There was one that got a little weird, though. Deadwood was an old west town at some point, but since then been turned into a tourist trap, casino hellhole. I was dragged through this town on a family road trip, and we had reservations at a place called the Bullock Hotel. The hotel was built in the 1890s by a Mr. Bullock, who supposedly still looks after the guests and the staff. I wasn't expecting to experience anything, but the ghost tour was pretty fun and had a lot of Old West cowboy stuff thrown in, so I played along. Later that night, we checked into our room, the corner of the top floor. I woke up in the middle of the night, colon nearly splitting open due to bad food, and sat on the toilet. I was stuck for a while, and I heard someone begin to pace in the room above us. It sounded like boots on hardwood, and I figured whomever it was simply couldn't sleep. I finished and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I remembered that we were on the top floor. The roof is not hardwood, and no one would have been pacing in the same spot for that long anyway.
Guys, I am fucking spooked. I consider myself agnostic, but I believe in souls and spiritual entities. This may include various spooks from different cultures. I have always felt spiritually in tune, and I get the heebie-jeebies quite often, as if I'm being watched. This usually also coincides with times where my cats go apeshit scared for seemingly no reason. Get the heebie-jeebies occasionally living in South Texas. Pretty rare, but cats get spooked too. Moved to South Dakota a week before Hurricane Harvey hit. We had no notice. We moved for a different reason. We live in a small town in the middle of fucking nowhere now. I now get the feeling at least once a week at night. I walk the dog at night sometimes and I fucking hate it. I see and hear weird shit moving in the tall grass of a close-by field in the corner of my eye when walking him. I even get the feeling in my room. Heartbeat goes crazy. One of my cats attempts to comfort me because they can sense your feels and shit. Always keep my blinds closed. I fucking hate the vibes I get near the window some nights. I read up on South Dakota culture to see why I'm like this. Find shit like the Devils of Spirit Mound. I hiked there when I was a tiny child. I hated it. For the past few months I have had horrible nightmares involving a road in the South Dakota plains. Shit myself when I read about the legend of Spook Road. Then I find what really pisses me off. Apparently there is something of a Boogeyman Slenderman in Sioux tribe legends called Walking Sam. Just reading the name made me wanna puke. Feels too familiar. Read that this thing has supposedly been forcing people in my age group to commit self-end. Normally only Sioux get targeted, but maybe I am just sensitive enough to get its attention assuming it's real. I hope to God I am just crazy. Sometimes I dream about this tall blurry motherfucker standing in the middle of the road about 150 feet away from me. I turn around to run and the guy is right fucking in my face before I wake up sweaty. What the fuck do I do? Am I crazy or am I gonna fucking die soon?
a famous ghost in Rapid City, South Dakota, is Hooky Jack. In life, his name was John Leary, but after a mining explosion in the 1,800 seconds, he lost both of his arms and one eye. His arms were replaced with hooks, hence the nickname Hooky Jack. He became a Rapid City police officer, but tragically died after being struck by a car in 1926. Now, his spirit is said to haunt his former residence, which has since been converted into a tavern. According to legend, Hooky Jack lived on the 3rd floor and can still be heard roaming up there today. Employees don't even want to venture to that floor unless they absolutely must. Many employees have even refused to work the closing shift alone. Voices, rattling, and eerie sounds can be heard upstairs at night. Strange flashing lights and spirit orbs have been caught on the proprietor's security footage. Multiple witnesses have seen chairs, tables, and the billiard balls moving around the table on their own. A few bartenders claim to have seen a figure sit at the end of the bar out of the corner of their eye, only to look up and realize there's no one there.
The Orpheum Theater. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, sits the historic Orpheum Theater with its very own ghost. The spirit, fondly referred to as Larry, may or may not be the ghost of an actor who disappeared during a dress rehearsal many years ago. Allegedly, the sound of a gunshot rang out from the light booth, but when his fellow actors ran up to investigate, all that remained was a pool of blood and no body was ever found. The Orpheum Theater first opened in 1913, but changed hands in 1954. The new owners allegedly found a casket in the boiler room, but when they came back later to clean things out, the casket was gone. Reports of strange noises and sightings of a shadow figure became common in the old theater, and one of the more intriguing reports happened in 1959. Actor Ray Loftsness became one of many to see this shadow man on the balcony. On that particular night, he said Larry was illuminated by the green and blue lights and was pointing directly at him. Loftsness claimed he was hit by an icy blast of air. Twice that night, he was assaulted by falling sandbags and was even knocked unconscious. Larry clearly had it out for the guy.
The Easton Castle, also known as the Yellow Brick House, was built sometime between 1889 and 1890 in Aberdeen, South Dakota. This 30-room, 3-story, Queen Anne-style mansion was covered in yellow bricks in 1902 when Carol Frances Easton took ownership. The housekeeper of this massive home just so happened to be Leslie Gage, the niece of L. Frank Baum, author of The Wizard of Oz. Gage was the inspiration behind Dorothy. Rumor has it, this muse of a housekeeper haunts the 3rd floor and has been seen all throughout the home. According to the whispers of busybodies of the time, the Easton's son became a little mad and reclusive after the death of his parents, hiding away in the old house that was now believed to be haunted. He didn't maintain the property, and its unkempt appearance only added to the lore of ghosts and curses swirling around the property. The mansion has your standard haunting tales like footsteps, creaking stairs, and disembodied voices, but apparently there's also a knife-wielding psycho spirit that chased one person out of there.
The Dakota Sioux Native Americans once hunted in the forested ravines known as Sica Hollow, that is, until they realized it was haunted and put a warning in its name. Sica means evil, and there are several legends that have come out of this state park. It's believed evil is steeped into every nook and cranny of this area, which is why the water runs red in the Sica Hollow springs. Never mind the mineral content, it's pure evil. The path referred to as the Trail of Spirits has bubbling red bogs and was believed by the Sioux to be the flesh and blood of their ancestors. Between all the red water, swamp gas, and tree stumps glowing in the dark, it's no wonder they thought the place was evil. Perhaps they were right. There was a rash of mysterious disappearances in the 1970s, paired with sightings of a half-man, half-beast similar to Bigfoot in those woods. Even today, visitors have claimed to see the spirits of Indians in addition to hearing voices, war cries, and chanting. Maybe those bogs really did consume the flesh and blood of the Sioux tribe's ancestors.
The town of Pactola became Pactola Lake in the 1950s when the mining town was submerged in water. That makes it a ghost town, but one report says there is a ghost on the lake as well and he likes to fish. According to a story by Bob Willis in the January 20, 1984 issue of the Rapid City Journal, there was once a man who fished Rapid Creek almost every day. He went mad for reasons unknown. South Dakota winters aren't for the weak and died one day after falling through the ice. His body was recovered in the spring and buried properly, but reports started coming in of the mad Pactola fisherman who was always fishing with a smile on his face. People spotted the ghost fishing for trout up and down Rapid Creek. He reportedly looked so lifelike that one might not even know he was a ghost. However, if he caught a fish, it mysteriously never had a hook mark in the lip. Things got weirder. Fishermen started reporting that their ice fishing lines would be torn away before suddenly going limp. Also, people would report cracking on the lake almost as if something or someone were down there trying to get out. Skeptics could easily dismiss the cracking and line pulls as part of ice fishing. But the legend says that if someone bores a hole in the ice that's large enough for a man to fit through, the cracking stops. When the hole freezes over, the cracking begins again as the Pactola fisherman starts trying to escape from under the ice.
Badlands National Park is not only one of the most amazing scenic spots in the world, but it is also one of the most eccentric. That area is a type of otherworldly experience, as if the land holds mysteries and myths hidden deep within the butts. The high rock formations seem to dare and challenge you to reach the top, perhaps climb as far and fast as you can in order to meet the people who are still roaming there. Just beyond your line of vision, over 11,000 years of human history have been recorded in this truly amazing area. The 250,000 acres filled with awe-inspiring pinnacles and spires that reach to the sky look as if they are used as an elevator by aliens to reach the spaceship they left behind. But then, those massive shapes meet up with the most expensive protected grass prairie in the whole United States, giving the Badlands National Park two extremes that offer a home for wildlife. A place for the perfect picture and, perhaps, the hidden homes of those spaceship dwellers. Speaking about aliens is not out of the realm, or even over-imaginative when it comes to the Badlands. In fact, this area has more myths and legends than any you could possibly think of. Here, you will find unknown tracks in the mixed grasses, along with archaeological findings of Indian wars, remnants of gold mining, and, of course, the requisite ghost towns with silhouettes of everyone from gunslingers to the fancy brothel girls walking amidst the desolation. The Badlands fill people with fascination for a reason. Evidence found shows that this is an area that can be dated back thousands of years to the first nomadic tribes that made the Badlands their home. This was the hunting grounds of the Paleo-Indians, mammoth hunters who were alive at the end of the Ice Age. The hunting inhabitants continued to come, with the Badlands being the place for the roaming buffalo. Harsh weather, long freezing winters that never seemed to end, and some of the most difficult terrain possible for both dwelling and hunting, is what the Badlands provided long ago. It was about a century and a half in the past that the Great Sioux Nation had displaced the other tribes from the northern prairie, commanding more than 80 million acres, and the Badlands term was not just created by recent people. In fact, the Lakota Sioux called the place Mako Sica, while early French trappers called it their own phrase, both meaning Badlands. Whether they named it such for the weather, the harsh terrain, or simply the creatures and other frightening events that took place there that were never recorded, no one can actually say. But soon, everyone from soldiers to miners to farmers took over the area and became a part of Badlands history. Even Lewis and Clark, making their famous trek in 1803, passed through the territory. However, as time moved forward, the populace increased. First the trappers, then the explorers, then came the Wild West rough and tough that would make history books for their more than interesting lives. It was the will of Congress in 1862, passing the Homestead Act, which was responsible for bringing everyone to the Badlands. Emigrants could purchase 160 acres of land for around $18, and as the lands filled, the Sioux and new settlers began to have issues. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 established the Great Sioux Reservation and ceded all lands from the Missouri River west to the Bighorn Mountains of western Wyoming to the tribes. Hostilities ceased, but only for a short time, as new battles began in another, more military, part of history was made. One myth that still reigns to this day is that frightening creature that may still roam the Badlands. Oddly enough, the legend was begun by the Irish, who elevated the Banshee of the Badlands to a unique status of horror that even Stephen King would love. A banshee is a female ghost known for a shriek that literally makes the blood run cold. And according to the Irish, the Banshee of the Badlands would appear out of the darkness to members of certain clans to warn them of their soon up and coming death. The Banshee was certainly far away from its Irish roots, however. It was said that a woman did lose her life near a butte in the Badlands called Watchdog. And ever since then, everyone from hunters to cowboys and war parties passing through the area claim they have heard the shrill shriek of a woman warning of death. So whether you are looking to find ghosts, legends, or just experience a truly sacred place, head to the Badlands and witness a unique history you will never forget.
The most famous thing that ever happened in Garrettson. South Dakota, was a meeting of the outlaw Jesse James and a ravine named Devil's Gulch. According to Garrettson lore, Jesse evaded capture just outside of town by spurring his horse to leap the ravine, a feat that everyone agrees is nearly impossible. Most historians believe that it is impossible. The town thinks that its impossibility only makes its reality more wonderful. Signs and plaques at the site, now named Devil's Gulch Park, are written with the pro-jump position in mind. Jesse found himself in out-of-the-way Garrettson in September 1876 after his gang had tried and failed to rob a bank in Northfield, Minnesota. For the next 2 weeks he fled west, staying ahead of his pursuers by stealing horses. Only Devil's Gulch stood between him and freedom. As a sign at the gulch breathlessly describes it, Jesse spun his horse and sprinted towards the chasm. With the lawmen watching with mouths agape, Jesse's horse hurled itself across the 20-foot gorge. There are more holes in this story than would eventually be in Jesse James. The posse was reportedly just a group of about 20 poorly armed local farmers, probably in no mood to get too close to a crack shot like Jesse. His horse was not Pegasus, but a half-broken-down farm nag, probably incapable of jumping even a fence. And Devil's Gulch is only a half-mile long. Jesse could have simply ridden around it, which is probably what he did. But we'll never know for sure. Devil's Gulch Park ignores the naysayers, as have generations of movie and TV westerns, which have embraced the law-evading gulch jump as an evasive maneuver. A plaque on a rock states firmly that the only way to evade the posse was to jump the chasm. Beyond it, an open-grill metal footbridge crosses the ravine, allowing you to look straight down at the water 60 feet below and better appreciate Jesse's daring do. Don't let the water below the bridge fool you. Caution's a sign. There are areas in the canyon reported to be so deep they are bottomless. Just under the bridge is known as Bottomless Pit. Many years ago, a 600-foot plumb line was lowered and no bottom was found. We scrambled across the bridge and down the steep Devil's Stairway to the water's edge to better gauge the awesomeness of Jesse's accomplishment. 20 feet across doesn't sound like much, but when you look up at the gap you realize that Jesse's jump really is something worth bragging about, especially since failure would have sent him tumbling into water without a bottom, his bones eventually washing up in China or whatever is on the opposite side of the planet from Garrettson. Devil's Gulch Park is free and tours are of the guide-yourself variety. An iron pipe sunk into the ground near the bridge acts as a donation box. It's open and capped by a block of iron with a coin slot, secured with several padlocks. Perhaps the relative remoteness of the park inspired its construction, which looks like something that not even Jesse James could break into. But then, Garrettson didn't become a travel destination by underestimating Jesse James.
The most popular and reported ghost story of the Hotel Alex Johnson is that of the Lady in White. During the 1970s, it was reported that a young bride committed self-end by flinging herself out of the window of room 812. Those that knew the young woman insisted there was foul play, stating that she was much too happy and friendly to commit such an act. The fact that she was to inherit a large sum of money only strengthened their argument. Yet, no one was ever convicted of her murder, and the self-end ruling stood firm. Today, guests claim the young bride wanders the halls of the 8th floor in a white gown, searching for those responsible for her death. It has been reported that the window of room 812 is often found open in the morning, and that dresser drawers are taken out, turned upside down and put back in place. Alex Johnson. Some guests have reported seeing the ghost of Alex Johnson himself. It is thought that since his death in 1938 he has stayed on the premises to ensure operations are still running smoothly. The young girl. Some guests of the 8th floor of the hotel have reported that the ghost of a young girl would knock on their door, night after night, only to disappear in the hallway. She's also been heard giggling down the hallway.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.